Well, does the world need a Moody's for AI? We'll discuss this further in today's episode of Intelligent Tech.
We're joined today by founders of Patronus AI, Rebecca and Anand. Hi both, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you want to start by telling us a bit about yourself and Patronus AI?
Yeah, definitely. I can kick it off. So my name is Anand, and my background is mainly in applied ML and data infra. A lot of the stuff that I've thought about has been around ML explainability and interpretability. So actually, several years ago, I started a quant hedge fund that was backed by Mark Cuban and folks from First Turn Capital. And a lot of the stuff that we did was around non-traditional data collection and ML interpretability. We actually then exit that fund to a fund that's been out of Bridgewater, after which I joined Meta Reality Labs as a founding data scientist, where I did a lot of work related to causal inference, advanced experimentation, set up a lot of the early foundations there, which was an org that grew from 2,000 to 20,000 people over a few years. And so a lot of the types of things that I've thought about were around how can we make models a lot more usable and interpretable? And that's what exactly got us started with Patronus, which we can dive into more in a second. But with that, I'll pass it off to Rebecca.
Yeah, absolutely. The world needs a Moody's for AI. And so before this, that's actually what I was doing at AI. So I was a researcher at Meta AI, specifically focused on NLP. And my research interests were actually very centered around red teaming, AI safety evaluation. So I was advised leadership and really building up our responsible NLP vision. And long before hallucinations in terms like AI safety have entered like the popular vernacular, we were talking about it from a research setting and realizing it was a huge problem that language models were facing. And so, Anand and I actually overlapped at Meta AI, and we've known each other for almost 10 years. So we're incredibly excited to be working together and to be building Patronus.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, we have lots of questions about how Patronus works, but I thought we'd start by asking what your favorite piece of AI technology is, or what your favorite LLM is, or maybe something that piques your interest at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, of course, being having worked on the red team safety evaluation for Llama, I am a bit biased because we did do a lot of work there. But I think what's really important for us at Patronus is actually to be unbiased to third parties. So it's what we keep hearing from companies, that they're looking for a trusted third-party authority to evaluate. They're looking for that benchmark like that Moody's. So I would say that each language model has its strengths and weaker areas, and different models are better for different use cases.
Yeah, and I'd add on top of that, I think a particular type of tool that I've been using a lot more, especially over the past year than ever before, is a code generation tool. So something like ChatGPT or GitHub Copilot, both of which I use a lot. And it's because it's completely replaced other types of products for me, for example, Stack Overflow. And I would say that every engineer that uses one of those code generation tools will agree with you that it is definitely a very, very big accelerant for productivity. Because it can write a lot of different types of in a lot of different types of languages. It can also help give you explanations on specific sections of code as well. So all of those things have been just incredibly useful and just fun to use.
Great. And Rebecca, you mentioned there that you both worked at Meta. Is that how you met? Do you mind telling us how you met and how you came up with the idea for Patronus?
We actually have known each other for almost 10 years. So part of that included at Meta. Part of that was also at the University of Chicago, where we first started doing ML research. So it's really been a long time, and it's been a long journey. And in terms of getting started with Patronus, so I was very focused on evaluation on the research side, and Anand was working on AI explainability in a more applied setting at Meta. So, we were talking about some of these problems even years ago, like in 2020, and Anand can share, the exact moment where we realized that this needed to be something that we worked on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd say that especially after ChatGPT was released, it was just very clear that it was no longer just a research problem. It was something that a lot of enterprises were going to have problems with very quickly. And it's interesting because as I talked to Rebecca, we were seeing these kinds of issues happening on the research side at Meta, and it was just very clear that when people were trying to use these models in production, they were going to run into the same problems around hallucinations or models that have different types of concerns. And something that really caught my attention was actually my younger brother, who is in investment banking, told me that his company had banned the use of ChatGPT inside his company. And so that's when it really caught our attention that what you see 100 million users on ChatGPT in the first 2 months, but then why were enterprises proceeding so cautiously very early on? So that is what gave us the message that this was going to be a much bigger problem than we thought.
Well, it's really interesting to hear about your journey. And now sort of focusing on Patronus, could you tell us a little bit more about what a client would receive from working with Patronus?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Patronus does is it helps companies be able to use generative AI with a lot more confidence. And the product itself is a way for companies to ultimately do automated failure detection in language models. So essentially be able to capture things like hallucinations, unexpected behavior, unsafe outputs on very specific real-world use cases that they're using language models for. So traditionally, what we continued to hear was that the largest companies in the world were spending millions of dollars on internal QA teams and external consultants to actually manually create test cases and manually grade outputs in big spreadsheets. And so, of course, that's incredibly unscalable. But at the same time, you see some of the smaller companies that don't have that kind of budget actually not testing and evaluating language models at all. They would just try to prompt the model a couple of times and then just hope that it works in the real world. And so what we wanted to really do was to work on translating some of the AI research work that we're doing to be able to ultimately allow people to do evaluation, testing, and security in a much more scalable way for enterprise. And so that's always been the big focus for us.
And am I right in understanding that a client would receive perhaps a score or a kind of a percentage metric in some way, shape, or form to tell them, how confident they can be in their technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually call these what we term model failures. So a failure can be something such as a hallucination, like Anand mentioned, or it can be simply something that's as straightforward as for example, a company that's working in the financial services industry that's putting out like a finance chat. You don't want the chatbot to answer political questions or to start giving like personal investment advice. And so it's really just, I was talking about this with Isabel too. It's just, do we want AI to do what we tell it to do? And so is the AI actually doing what it's supposed to do? And so those are the kinds of edge cases that we catch, that we test and identify, things that we catch in our security evaluators that our users do not actually end up exposing that to their clients.
And the one thing I'd add to that is that I would say that the hardest part about using language models is actually the quantitative performance piece of it. And in particular, models like these are very different from traditional ML models because they're just a lot more inconsistent. You might prompt ChatGPT in consecutive ways with the same exact prompt, and you might get slightly different nuances in meaning. You might even get completely different answers altogether. And so it's a really challenging research problem because of the fact that language models can be very indeterministic.
And how often should companies be using the Patronus product? Is this something that companies should be sort of evaluating regularly? Is it a weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis? Sort of what do you envision for, the use of the product?
Yeah, so companies using Patronus today are using it very frequently. And the main reason for that is language models are moving targets. Research labs are updating language models very frequently with new data that is coming in based on how people are using them. On top of that, I'd say that our expectations for language models have been increasing over time as well, especially now that the novelty effect has worn off over the past year. And so people are expecting more. And so as a part of that, language models are going to continue to be moving targets. And so what we tell companies is that the evaluation against those models has to be moving as well. And so this isn't kind of a one and done thing, but every time you want to understand how prompt engineering might change the outputs, fine-tuning, and other types of methods, including changing generation parameters, prompt training, and of course, anytime any underlying model is changed, whether it's an API or an internal model that you've updated, anytime that's changed, you would have to understand how quantitatively performance has changed as well.
So from what I gather, you guys actually haven't been in business for that long. So tell us a little bit about the beginning of your journey.
It's been a short amount of time on paper, but it feels like it's been a longer time just in terms of the amount of things that we've accomplished, and we've grown our team very quickly. And also, like Anand said, we're productionizing research that we've been doing for years. So we've been having conversations about the topic, years ago.
Does Patronus also evaluate sort of ethical AI, and does it give a client an ethical rating for, the big data sets that these language models are using?
Absolutely. We look at a number of different indicators on language models, especially around the safety piece. So actually, around safety in particular, we've done a lot of work around especially toxicity and PAI. So on the toxicity piece, we've actually done a lot of research work where we've been able to, at scale, generate test cases that we've found to elicit toxic outputs from models, especially open source models. And we've been able to show a lot of our customers very specific instances where things like this can happen. And then on the PAI side, we've actually done a lot of work, especially from an enterprise perspective. Last week, we actually had an announcement with Mosaic ML that went viral on social media because of our focus around business sensitive information. Over the past year, the number one blocker the enterprises cite about generative AI is data privacy. Yet we were the first to focus on something that was specific to how companies can prevent and even just understand how language models are exposing confidential information, whether that's things like revenue figures, salary details, customer account names, things like that. So there's a lot of work we've done around indicators like that as well. And in the coming months, we're also going to continue to look at other aspects of language models, like copyright behavior in particular is a big one that we know folks, especially in the legal world, are very interested in understanding what language models do.
So can you tell us a little bit about what people should keep in their minds when they hear the word Patronus?
Yeah, I'd say that ultimately what companies are starting to now see us as is the Moody's of AI. And the reason for that is there are models released every week now that call themselves the best models in the world. And they do that by cherry picking results. And so it's really confusing to a lot of people what they should be doing, what models should they use for a particular use case, how well do they perform. And so what companies are looking for is an unbiased, independent perspective. And they're looking for a trusted third-party evaluator that can tell them about quality and performance, in addition to actually helping them understand performance quantitatively in a very scalable way.
And what's your sort of future vision for Patronus? In 10 years' time, what do you see Patronus as?
So, we think that we're entering a world in which a lot of AI workflows and knowledge work is being rapidly replacing human workflows, and we're quickly going to see more AI-generated content be across all modalities. And so there's a couple of ways in which we see Patronus growing into becoming the trusted third-party benchmark for all AI-generated output. And so one area is we're starting with text, but of course, in the future, we can see ourselves expanding into other modalities and other kinds of pipelines. Like, for example, one way that people are using language models is they're actually, including retrieved context, because knowledge workers such as financial analysts or, people working in the legal industry are often working with very large documents, and that's something that we are supporting as well and doing a lot of active research in. We also just definitely see the automation of this process of evaluation becoming more important, because like Anand said, right now, these teams are spending a lot of human validation. So even when they have AI, they're still having humans fact check the AI outputs at the end. And so we want to help reduce that percentage going forward.
Fantastic. That all sounds very exciting.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, it seems like there's really a market for a ratings agency in AI,
Absolutely, yeah.
it's really interesting to talk to you at this stage of your journey, and I suppose it will be really interesting to follow along and see where Patronus is in a number of years and what the market looks like then. But yeah, it's been fascinating to talk with you both.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.
Tune in next time for another episode of Intelligent Tech.